I have previously been critiqued for taking a bit of a try-hard approach to my video games, and I even heard the phrase that I'm optimizing the fun out of my EU4. Frankly, this is an absurd allegation. I roleplay in all of my games, I'm just roleplaying as a winner. But today I want to suggest for you 5 campaigns, for you to get into that whole roleplay mood, with little tidbits and optional challenges on the way, as it were. They are certainly going to be following a difficulty curve, starting with I'm struggling to beat the Ottomans and ending on a one faith is too easy, just too grinding. So we're going to be covering all skill levels today. Otherwise, well, a like would be appreciated if you haven't already, and a subscription would be amazing. But enough self-shitting, let's start with campaign number 1, which takes us into Hungary today, where I'm going to be affectionately calling this the Bulwark of Christendom. Now, I mentioned earlier that the difficulty curve starts from I'm struggling to beat the Ottomans, and indeed that's going to be a pretty big part of the challenge today. See, when is the best time to fight the Ottomans? Well, the best time to fight the Ottomans is much like in investing 20 times ago, but the second best time to fight the Ottomans is today. And the reality of the situation is that if you do manage to fight the Ottomans before they go and grab Constantinople and they kill Byzantium and they kill the little Bosnia and Serbians and Wallachians and they go kill Dalkadir and Karaman and get all this free land, you're going to have an easier time because they're going to be smaller. So the actual best way and optimal way to fight the Ottoman Empire, as it were, would be to find them as Hungary in 1444, because you literally border the things you can't just go in, right? But that's not going to be part of the campaign today, and indeed that'll be part of, well, why it's difficult, right? Because what we're going to be doing today is, in this campaign specifically, we're going to be abusing the fact that we start with truces due to this whole Varna Crusade shenanigans that was happening, right? And we're going to specifically not fight them until the Ottomans are declaring war on us. So, to prepare for that, I'd say go ahead and get the Balkans sorted, which, easier said than done, but go ahead and expand it to Serbia, into Bosnia, into Herzegovina, grab all of this land, it's relatively free land, and eventually be able to fight Venice and secure a bit more of the Balkans. Then go ahead and ally Poland, or in this case, I guess they rivaled you, so you're not allying them. But you can go ahead and ally Austria usually, and let Austria do their thing. Hopefully they don't do their thing into making you a personal union, but something for you to bulwark against as well. And in general, I like to draw the quote-unquote borders of what you should have is keep Croatia, so the Croatia state and the Slavonia state, so all of this. Expand into Croatia, expand into Dalmatia, expand into this area here. Grab into Raskia and Serbia, so eventually you'll kill this province here from Venice, because it's also a nice mountain fort for you to have against the Ottomans. Let the Ottomans take the rest, because eventually they would. And what you're going to have is a quite large border with the Ottomans and try and prevent them expanding further into Europe. It's going to be difficult, especially if you do just let the Ottomans scale. I'll let you decide what you do with Dalmatia. You can vassalize them, you can let the Ottomans just have them, really that one's up to you. And yeah, have this border as the bulwark of Christianity. As part of the challenge, I would say, is also no actual expanding and weakening of the Ottomans. You can take money from them, sure you can take war reps, but never any direct land or taking land from the Ottomans until you're in the 1600s, in which case you can go in and finally crush them and win your campaign, but have a defensive campaign against the Ottomans for 150 years. So you have 5 years to set up by expanding into Serbia, setting up your country, and honestly, there's plenty of land here to grow tall in the meantime, right? Because if you actually look at the land in Hungary proper, it's quite a bit of it. There's a lot of provinces and a lot of not bad provinces to dev. Specifically within the central Hungary areas, there's a lot of grasslands, pests as a farmland, just good land to dev, and hey, even a couple more farmlands here for you to develop and build up, right? So it's certainly not a bad country in that regard. And the Ottomans will provide an ever-present threat for your administration. Now, it is still, of course, AI, so it should be pretty beatable, but this will let you learn the game a bit more if you're a bit newer, while also having a roleplay Bulwark of Christianity kind of campaign. And you'll have a bit of a mid-game challenge thrown in, as the Protestant Reformation is going to kick off in the 1500s, and that's obviously going to complicate relations with your fellow Catholics, and should prove for more interesting developments into your campaign. But Bulwark of Christendom aside, from Hungary we're going to move on to our next challenge. See, we could defend Christianity. In fact, we could become the bulwark of Catholicism or Christianity or whatever you want to say, indeed. But what if we wanted to restore Catholics to their former glory, to their greatness and their peaks that they only desired? What if we wanted to rebuild not just the kingdom of God, but the Holy Land itself, all under our glorious and very Catholic leadership? Well, for that, may I suggest to you our second campaign, involving rather surprisingly France, and this one, if you do happen to have EU4 friends around, is one I'd suggest you invite. You can do this with AI, but I think this is more fun if you have friends role-playing along with you. If you do struggle to have friends, either in general or specifically friends that play EU4, first of all, my apologies, but secondly, I do have a Discord channel where there's EU4 and other stuff going on, so feel free to head on over down there and start any of these roleplay campaigns with EU4 friends for you to pick up from there. Self-shitting aside though, what are we actually doing? Well, as France, once we resolve the question of the papal lands in Avignon, we're going to have a bit of a question whether we want to invade Italy or set up a holy march where we make the papal states basically complete their quote-unquote mini-mission tree and become the kingdom of God, letting the Pope basically run Italy for us. This will give us a golden march modifier, which is pretty nice, and also buff the Pope, which is neat. As part of this, and obviously securing Christendom's right to rule Italy as part of the kingdom of God, you would yourself maintain a very Catholic presence in France and hopefully crush any kind of Protestantism that's going to pop up. So certainly a campaign goal. But this is where the third part, the crusade, comes in, right? So you either want to put your friend on Provence, where they go ahead and do their Provence King of Jerusalem Crusader mission tree, which is cool, or go ahead and put your friends on the Knights. And the Knights is cool because if the Knights form Jerusalem, they actually get some unique bonuses. So, vassalize the Knights, let them go ahead and form Jerusalem, so you can make them a March of Jerusalem, and also ideally have your friends as marchers of the papal state, quote-unquote, kingdom of God, as it were, and enjoy your Catholic LARP, as you'll be taking a bit more of a, dare I even say, proactive approach towards the enemies of Christ, and spread Christianity far, far beyond these borders, to really make sure that everyone really knows the one true faith. Again, this is certainly doable in single player. You're able to go ahead and grab the Pope eventually as a vassal if you do your missions as France, and it's certainly not too difficult if you're France to eventually go ahead and pull off a crusade into the Mamluk Syrian lands and set up a Jerusalem state, which when you do, you can then, well, choose to form it, which releases a Jerusalem that you can then diplo-vassalize. You tend to be able to, depends on the situation. Sometimes you might have to move in and physically force them to become your vassal. That's really up to you. But I think this is more of a fun vassal co-op kind of campaign, and hey, it's a roleplay campaign, so it should be relatively interesting. And furthermore, of course, France does have a colonial path, so if you really want to, you can go ahead and spread the one true faith of Catholicism to the New World as well. Look, they're very lacking Catholicism here. There's just none of it, You need to go over there. I mean, who else, right? Who else but you? But indeed, that would be our second example of a roleplay campaign. A bit more challenging this time. It is just a glorified France playthrough following your missions tree, but you tend to be taking the, shall we say, suboptimal choices. Instead of just conquering Italy, you're giving it to your vassal, which I don't think the buff is really worth it, but it's great for the roleplay because, again, you're really supporting the kingdom of God and being a good Catholic kingdom. But if you're not really into this whole Catholic LARP, as it were, and you're really more into burning down the world, but you've already played the Mongol hordes a bit too much, may I suggest to you a little bit of a pun, shall we say, into a rather interesting campaign. Because for that, we're going to be playing Dongolia. So what's going on here in Dongolia? Well, you can already probably tell by the name that you share a striking similarity with a certain other Mongolian empire, and indeed that will be part of the roleplay today, to put the Mongolian empire to shame and make them seem as the budget version of your glorious Dongolian empire, and make the world fear the Dongol hordes. Now, you do start as Shia, so you're going to have trouble finding allies or frankly anyone else around you that agrees with your religious choices, but not only are you Shia, so Muslim, but you're a Muslim and Tier 1 matrilineal system. What is Queen Elizabeth II doing here? I'm just not going to ask any more questions. Anyway, this is going to give you a really weird government for 50% female advisor chance and minus 50% chance of heirs, because we famously know that women are 50% less likely at having children. Thank you, Paradox. Very cool. But most crucially, of course, is you are just a tribe, and the nice thing with being a Malachite tribe is, of course, you can become a horde. Doing so will, of course, abolish all of our girl power matrilineal systems. Sorry. But, as part of the glorious Dongolian hordes, you will be able to spread the good word of the Dongolian Empire. I hate this, but also I love this. And yeah, conquer the world to bring the might of the Dongols. Why is this a thing? I know Dongolia is like a real place, but it's almost too easy for them to become the Dongol horde. Challenge-wise, I guess it's pretty simple. Go restore the Mongolian Empire as a Dongolian horde. And it's certainly a bit of an uphill battle. You don't exactly start with too much. You kind of dig around in the desert for a bit. But the good news is with that is that so are most of your neighbors. And you do border someone that has a core on a steppe province. So hey, you can go retake your core. But point being is that yes, you start quite weak, but so does everyone else around you. And the nice thing with the Mamluks is they do tend to die to the Ottomans, meaning you can pick up some scraps in that, centralized power within the Ethiopia, Adal, this kind of area, and eventually start moving into either Arabia or down into Africa. From there on, you'll have a sufficient enough power base to start fighting the big boys like the Ottomans without too much of an issue, in my opinion. And indeed, there you go, you'll be playing as the Dongolian hordes in the Dongolian Empire. I'm just very surprised that Paradox specifically coded. I mean, I'm sure there's some kind of cool history about this, but I guess who's the Dongolian historian that knows about the sheer Dongol matriarchy that was going on here? Sorry, not matriarchy, matrimonial system that was going on here, because clearly this isn't a game for a reason. Like, what's actually going on here? Memes aside, though, because this country is a stunning meme in that regard, let's move on to our fourth choice. And for that, I'm going to say, well, the Mongols, or sorry, the Dongol hordes, very passionate about burning the world to the ground. But what if you wanted to play tall? But the Netherlands just ain't cutting it. Now, you want a bit more of a challenge. Well, for your Roleplay Tall Colonial Empires campaign, may I suggest to you the Kingdom of Brittany. Brittany is in a weird spot. Its home trade node of Bordeaux is a colonial trade node, as it does have incoming money from both the Ivory Coast, allowing for expansion into said Ivory Coast, and hence expansion into Africa and Asia and all of that good stuff. It has incoming from the Caribbean, allowing for expansion into South America and Central America, and it's incoming from the Gulf of St. Lawrence, meaning that you can actually get quite a lot of money coming in into the Bordeaux trade node. Indeed, if you ever do that, you'll notice that within the Bordeaux trade node itself, there's actually not that much competition. Bordeaux, of course, is the namesake, and with the estuary and the natural harbour here, there's going to be a lot of trade power being stolen from you. The same for the Basse-Poitevin estuary. That's going to have a bunch of trade power. But you still have an estuary and a centre of trade to be able to contend and fight back, as it were. And the part of the challenge here is a Tall Brittany campaign. See, Brittany historically survived because it was able to play off England and France during the 100 Years' War between each other. But that does mean that eventually, namely when England's going to get kicked out of here and you're going to not be able to play the French off against the English anymore, the French are going to come knocking. And this is why it's a tier 4 challenge, because realistically you're not going to be able to outscale the French here. They're going to have a relatively easy time invading you. So make sure you grab your alliances and do what you can to secure Brittany's independence without expanding past Brittany. Once you've done that, go tall. You have 5 provinces here that are, frankly, not awful for development. 2 grasslands, which are certainly nothing to complain about, but you also have 3 farmlands, 2 of which are cloth farmlands. The 2 non-cloth farmlands are going to have a centre of trade, which you can develop to level 3, so even more dev costs, and in general, you can build Brittany all the way to the moon. Less of a developable land than, of course, the Netherlands, but that's part of the challenge. The Netherlands are relatively easier compared to this. And as you are setting up your colonial empire, and most crucially, you're not actually taking over the Bordeaux trade node, you're going to be leaking a lot of trade power to Champagne, you'll be leaking a lot of trade power to the English Channel. It's going to have issues, right? And what that also means is that as you're setting up your large colonial empires, you're going to be buffing the likes of France for their inevitable invasion of you. So it should be a bit more interesting in that regard to see if you can survive as Brittany as you're actively buffing your enemies. It's going to be challenging. The further the game keeps going, it's going to be even more challenging as the French are going to continue to scale. But that's the challenge. Can you survive as Gigatall Brittany and make Brittany the Netherlands that never was? Or actually, I guess the Netherlands was there. Can you just be a really successful Brittany? Your ideas are surprisingly not awful for this, with Yeti Navy tradition and trade steering buffing any kind of colonial income you're getting, and ship costs as well as naval force, meaning that, well, since you're not allowed to expand, you'll probably need to build a bunch of light ships to protect trade power in Bordeaux, so you'll be able to at least afford that. Otherwise, it's not the Netherlands, so you're also going to be a bit behind in terms of you're not going to get any colonists or anything extra cool out of this idea set. And the mission trees, not that bad. Although, do bear in mind, they're going to involve expansion pretty quick. And part of the challenge and the roleplay is, you just sit in Brittany. But okay, you can build this gigatall Brittany empire. You can have every promise of 50 development and own half of the New World in a glorious Brittany colonial empire. That's all great. But what if you didn't really want to do that? What if actually running the government sounds like a bit too much? What if the government ran itself? Indeed, I've actually heard some political philosophy on the topic, and I've been doing a little bit of reading myself, which usually is a bad idea. But I've come across this concept that anarchy is the mother of order. And if you know what the phrase anarchy, mother of order originally comes from, go ahead in the comment section, go comment, hello lemon cake, I'm a good boy, I've done my reading, or something akin to that, so that I know you're a real well-read theory person. Anyway, anarchy is indeed the name of the game for the 5th challenge. And with that, I don't actually have a starting country for you, just some suggestions. The requirements are relatively simple. Any single native tribe would do. All you're really looking at is stateless society. This is a lot of government reform, and it says what it is on the tin. It is a stateless society. Coming with a pretty impressive 50 morale of armies and 75% for defense, it sounds pretty good until you realize you don't get to govern anything. With a 99% governing capacity reduction, you're not going to be able to rule anything that isn't your capital state. And that's going to be quite difficult for you to run your glorious stateless society empire, because you're not going to be just passively sitting on one state. No. As part of the stateless society, you need to go ahead and grow your empire and still manage to govern the world despite this modifier. And oh boy, is it going to be a big challenge, because 99% gov cap means that if you ever do obtain this reform, here it is, it's going to be locked, so no leaving it, and once you've done it, your gov cap's 4. Meaning it's trivially easy to exceed the thing. This is a capital state. What happens if we take one person outside of a capital state? We're now using 14 out of 4 governing capacity. This, of course, means that we're like 2.5 times over our governing capacity, meaning our administrative efficiency is now 0. Yeah, this is bad. So how can you fix this? How is this even remotely playable? We actually have a couple tools up our sleeve. Most obviously, we have administrative ideas with 20% governing capacity modifier right at the end of it, which is going to be quite helpful, as it's going to decrease our penalty from, in essence, minus 100% to just minus 80%. Still pretty crippling, but kind of almost playable. Infrastructure ideas can also kind of help. I'm assuming you're going to be struggling to state anything, so state governing cost, while pretty nice at minus 10% is nice, it's not going to help you that much since you probably won't even have the governing capacity for provinces, but where infrastructure shines is the infrastructure aristocratic policy, as infrastructure aristocratic also has governing capacity plus 10% on the policy, as you can see here right at the bottom, monthly autonomy change and governing capacity modifier plus 10%. Now, instituting aristocratic rule in the middle of an anarchist state is probably not the greatest thing for your roleplay, so make sure you get your roleplay ready as to why you're instituting aristocratic rule in the middle of your roleplay state. But you can also just do that, so thank you, Paradox, that's an option. Anyway, your other friend, of course, is the Grand Palace of Bangkok with plus 15% governing capacity, and once you get filthy rich, you'd probably want to grab Economic Hegemon for plus 20% governing capacity modifier. Now, this is where I'm going to start questioning Paradox's design choices, more specifically that Paradox is telling us that the only way to rule the world as a stateless anarchist society is to become filthy rich, go sit in a palace, and get aristocratic rule to keep everyone in check, which I think at this point we've kind of gotten past anarchy, but hey, whatever helps you sleep at night. In a true and somewhat beautiful and poetic twist of irony, of course, the only other way to still remotely get away with this massive governing capacity reduction of minus 99% is going to be courthouses, town halls, and of course, state houses. The courthouses followed by town halls can reduce the province governing costs by up to 50%, meaning that you can get it pretty low, and with state houses reducing the statewide governing cost by 20%, you're able to get this down to minus 70%. Since they're more effective on paper, glass, and gems, this reduction can keep going and actually become pretty substantial, allowing you to reduce statewide governing costs by 90% and up to 100%, so free state governing costs, if you also combine this with, of course, our aforementioned infrastructure minus 10 state governing cost. This continues to make this a beautiful twist of irony, as the only way to run a stateless society is a whole bunch of state houses. Literally, they are called state houses. The only way to maintain a stateless society is with a whole lot of state houses everywhere. So again, I just want to really drive this point home. The only way to have a stateless society is with a whole bunch of state houses everywhere. You can have a successful anarchist stateless society, and you're going to look inside, and it's full of state houses, the rich people living in palaces, and the aristocracy running around in charge of everything. Which, thank you, Paradox, you couldn't have phrased it better myself. Anyway, this is why this is a level 5 challenge. Not only would this be an incredible feat of physical game knowledge to pull off a stateless society full state world conquest, you'd also involve quite a bit of mental gymnastics, as you'll need to obtain gold at the Olympics as you try and justify to your stateless society population why you need to keep building state houses everywhere, and also why you need all of this money for economic hegemon, and also why we're putting all of that money into the big Grand Palace of Bangkok. Look, it's for the governing capacity, right? Like, we need it. It's 15% gov cap, right? Truly a poetic setup. In terms of nations you can actually attempt this with, for full-on roleplay, we of course have the rather classic 3 anarchist state options that are available in here. These are all the 3 stateless societies the game starts with, but you can also just do this as any tribe. And in terms of access to tribes, there's quite a few. From Central African tribes just ready to become a stateless society with 50 government reform progress, to Tibetan monks, one Buddhist innovation away from becoming an anarchist state. The choices truly are yours. But indeed, that is all the time I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching, with a special thank you to all my channel members, especially Ark, Soda, W Haste, Salemon, Cell72, Lord Zendikar, Nick Fassbender, Nanhatan, Nikos, The Awesome Rabbit, Destro Gaming, Granville Flavia, Sov, Mobkiller, Anthony35, AC Napo, Glorious Leader, Frankie, Yukata, Danray, Private Claw, Jack, Marvy, Conspiracy Pizza, and Labarune.